Hey everybody, I hope you've all had a great week this week. For us here in Congress this week, we continue to build off the progress that we made last week working on combating the opioid epidemic. It's devastated our community and so many other communities. On top of that, we had bills that were working to prevent fraud with our seniors, bills that were working to take critical steps in protecting communities against vehicular terrorist attacks, and we also voted on one bill related to border security that addressed a number of things from chain migration to visa lottery to deferred action for child arrivals, and making sure that families that are trying to seek asylum coming into our country, while they are detained, they will have the opportunity to stay together as a family unit. So a number of things to talk about today. First thing I want to talk about, the most important thing that's going on in our community, it's our waterways. It's what's going on with the Corps of Engineers, the discharges coming out of Lake Okeechobee. If you don't know, right now about 40% of Lake Okeechobee, literally about 40%, maybe a little bit more than that, is literally covered in a toxic algal bloom. And for us, when they're opening up the locks at Port Mayaca like they've been doing for the last 4 weeks, the last 23 days, discharging this toxic water into our community, that's like when you see water just going down the drain. That's what it's like for us. That toxic algal bloom, as they're draining that water out our way, it's that water just going down the drain, coming into what should be our beautiful blue pristine estuaries with seagrass and fish life, and that's not what's happening here. Instead, we have disgusting odors, we have rancid dead fish kills, we have airborne pathogens, we have these toxins that threaten the health and the safety of our children, of our families, our waterways, where our kids can now not swim, where they can't fish, where we can't get out there and go paddle boarding or kayaking or boating, or we can see we're on the heels of the 4th of July, and I think we can see the writing on the wall that we potentially might not even be able to go enjoy the water or the sandbar or things like that on the 4th of July. And it's terrible. It's terrible for me. It's terrible for all of our neighbors, all of our friends, and we don't deserve this. Now, yesterday morning, I delivered a jar of water, that same water that's being discharged, those algal blooms that are being discharged into our waterway. I delivered it to the floor of the House of Representatives to show my colleagues exactly how disgusting our water has become, exactly what's coming into our waterway. Nearly half of Lake Okeechobee, as I said, it's covered in this algal bloom. So that's literally, we're talking about hundreds of square miles of toxic algae, and I wanted my colleagues to be able to understand exactly what was going on here. We deserve answers as to why the health and the safety of the citizens of the Treasure Coast is viewed as a lower priority than other factors. This is all about what these decisions are being made of. They want shared adversity. That's what the Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule is all about. That document is literally, it's about sharing the adversity of that water on Lake Okeechobee. But the reality is, we weren't sharing in the pollution of Lake Okeechobee. It wasn't the Treasure Coast. It wasn't those that are on the waterways and on the Indian River Lagoon that were out there polluting Lake Okeechobee. It's not where the nutrients in the water in Lake Okeechobee came from. That's not the fault of the people on the Treasure Coast. They're not sharing in the polluting of it. We're having our entire community destroyed as a result of that water coming our way. And the reality is, I'm not going to stop fighting until we get the answers that we deserve and until this problem is solved. Now, the big question that I posed in a letter that I posed on the floor of the House of Representatives, which I think we absolutely deserve a very, very serious answer to, is how much is too much? How much pollution is too much pollution? How much health danger is too much health danger? What is the point that somebody at the Corps of Engineers would literally say, no, we can't do this. We have to draw the line there. That is too much danger for that community. That's too much damage to that community. We deserve an answer to know where would they draw the line, if anywhere? What's the ladder of escalation for that? What's the flow chart that shows this would be too much? Because that's something that we deserve to know. Now, shifting gears a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, we also continued to build on the progress that we made last week in the fight against the opioid crisis. This week, we passed 20 more bills to expand the treatment for substance abuse disorders under Medicare, under Medicaid, under CHIP. This is all to encourage alternative and less addictive methods for pain relief, to crack down on the illicit trafficking and fraudulent opioid prescribers that are out there. For example, one of these bills, the Senior Communities Protection Act, it would allow Medicare to suspend suspend payments to pharmacies if there are credible allegations of fraud pending against them, and a lot more. You can read more about these bills if you want to on my website, mast.house.gov/blog. We also passed a bill this week to develop tools to address evolving terrorist threats. As I mentioned, vehicular slaughter, which we've seen become an increasingly common tactic for terrorists to use. We saw it last year in Manhattan, where 8 people died. We saw a devastating attack in Spain 2 years ago where 86 people were tragically killed. This bill will help Department of Homeland Security establish a clear strategy to safeguard against those kinds of attacks. Just like all of these kind of things, there's not a silver bullet that addresses and says everybody's always going to be absolutely safe. But if we think about it in advance, it's ways that we can help to prevent this, and that's what needs to be done. It's what everybody deserves to have done. Finally, I want to speak to you about the crisis at the border, which is, frankly, it's unacceptable. A solution is long overdue. This is something that has been a long time coming, and we have to cut off on a number of fronts. We have to cut off illegal immigration. We have to restore the rule of law and fix the loopholes that are hurting both American citizens and those that are looking to come into our country legally. That's why I voted for a bill this week called the Securing America's Future Act, and I plan to vote for another bill next week called the Border Security and Immigration Reform Act. Together, both of these bills, they massively strengthen border security. They end the separation of children from their parents. Now, there was an executive order that took care of that in the short term, but this is something that still has to be addressed in the long term, because there are court cases out there that have set the precedent to say this is the way the rule of law is going to work as it relates to detaining individuals coming into this country who entered illegally, whether they're seeking asylum or not. If they entered illegally, this is what's going to occur. So there has to be long-term legislative fixes, and these are those long-term legislative fixes. Beyond this, there's work done there to make sure that we stop chain migration, eliminate the visa lottery system, provide legal certainty to DACA recipients. These are all things that are going on that are important in these bills. Now, while the administration's executive order will maintain family unity at the border, this doesn't excuse Congress from the responsibility of addressing our broken immigration system. It is beyond comprehension to me that even though these bills meet the pillars that have been outlined by the administration to both say it is strong in maintaining the rule of law, strong in protecting our border, and at the same time it keeps families unified and it gives that legal certainty to those DACA recipients about what's going on with their future, that politicians in Washington still keep voting to put politics ahead of the people that they represent by not participating in this process. These are good solutions that are addressing all of the issues that are affecting us as it relates to southern border security, as it relates to people entering our country illegally, as it relates to those families being separated, and so many other things. It's very good legislation, and it fixes those failures that are in the status quo. Now, America, as we all know, it is a nation of immigrants, and I think we're all proud of that. Most all of us, look back in our own family histories, and we're proud of what exists there. My own grandparents, 2 of my grandparents, they immigrated here legally from Mexico. And we can all acknowledge that there should be compassion for those who want to legally enter the United States of America, follow our laws, but we have to be clear that it is the right of American citizens to be protected by American laws. Above all else, our laws exist to protect our country. Even though I have 2 parents that immigrated here legally from Mexico, 2 grandparents rather, that immigrated here legally from Mexico, that doesn't give me the right to go and enter Mexico illegally or any other country illegally, and no other person has the right whatsoever, regardless of any circumstances going on in their life, to enter our country illegally. And there's nothing wrong with us being very, very clear about that. It's what I think we owe the world, is to be very clear about that, so they make sure individuals that want to come in here, they know that they need to go through the appropriate process. They need to go through one of our ports of entry if they want to seek asylum. They need to fill out the correct paperwork if they want to seek whatever way of getting into this country. It's not going to happen in the illegal way, because that process has come to an end, and people will be going through the right channels. That's what everybody deserves, both citizens and those wishing to come here alike. On that note, as I always tell you all, it is an absolute honor to represent you here in Congress. I always look forward to seeing you all around town. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you have a great rest of your week next week. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody around town this weekend at church. I think I'm going to be joining one of my sons for his baptism, so that's exciting. I'll be joining him over at Christ Fellowship, so I'm excited about that. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and I'll look forward to seeing you all there. Take care. All the best.